Thanks for being here. The topic of my talk is porn, tidal wave, sink or swim. The question isn't whether we're inundated in porn, it's whether you're going to sink or swim. I am a commercial photographer and videographer. I am not a content expert, although I will tell you that 3 years of studying in anticipation for this, you can learn a lot. I make videos for commercial clients and things like this. I'm actually the producer here, and the reason I'm here is to give you the 30,000-foot view. You've heard that expression. It's just the overview of what's going on with the topic of pornography, specifically in the church. You know, porn really wasn't on my radar at all. 10 years ago, if you'd have rewound the clock and said, hey, what would you be on the stage talking about? This would be not making the top 1,000 topics. But here I am, and here you are. You know, it was years ago that I had my own brush with pornography. You know, I mean, I work at home. I'm a commercial photographer. I need high-speed internet connections. A lot of times I'd end up working by myself, and if you've got a computer, you know porn's out there. And I discovered it, and I thought, yeah, you know, it went from exposure to a irregular habit to discomfort. I was like, something's not right with this. I just don't like it. I think I'm going to quit. And it was easy. I must have quit 100 times. And then I realized this is bigger than just a willpower thing. I need some tools. And so I started to research and look around, and I found some ministries and some resources, which we'll share with you. But between my surrendering this to God and the ministry of other people, I came clean. It was behind me. And I really didn't think much about it. It still wasn't on my radar. You know, it was just a thing that I was out there like, I eat too much ice cream. Quit eating ice cream. That's cool. And move on with life. But then I had a growing realization that this was an actual problem. Little things happened, and I didn't connect the dots at first. I was volunteering and doing photography for a school in a very rural area where they do intensive therapy with young people. These kids are going through therapy for things like they've seen their parents killed, you know, or they've attempted suicide multiple times, or they have incredible anger management problems. So I got to see them in the classrooms and in the counseling sessions and so on like this, and you could see the angst on their faces. But there was one kid I met, and he was sitting in a thing, just sitting down there. I said, so he didn't look like the others, just like a regular kid. I said, oh, what are you in here for? He's about maybe 15 years old. He said, oh, porn addiction. I was like, oh, what? What is that? That's a thing? You can be in therapy for that? I had no idea. A couple years later, I heard story, not a million miles away or a million years ago, that there was a doctor who was fired. And that doctor was fired for watching porn in the hospital, in an operating room, during a case. And I thought, are you kidding me? Well, how does that happen? How is that even a thing? What would make a person do that? Wow. None of that made sense until I read Annie Lobert's book, Fallen. Amazing. It's her redemption story about how she was a professional lady of the night. Okay? She was a prostitute. It's her redemption story. And in this story, she talks about a time she had been living with her abusive pimp for maybe 5-7 years, and she comes back from work one night, her work, right? So she comes back in the morning after working all night, finds her pimp watching porn, and she's heartbroken. She feels bad inside. I just about threw the book down. I said, what is this? What is so toxic that it could make a prostitute feel bad? Then I started to look. I thought, man, what is this stuff? And the more I started to look, wow, was I blown away. 68 million internet searches for porn daily. The top 5 porn sites combined, look at that number, 17.73 billion, that's with a B, visits per month. Look at that time. Look how many visits there are between when I started that slide and when I finished. It's out there, folks. It is out there, and I was absolutely blown away. Well, that's the secular world, though, right? It's like, wow, but what about in the church? Really? Well, there's an interesting book, The Porn Phenomena. Barna put it together, and it's got a lot of very interesting statistics in it. Look at that. 49% of young adults and 32% of teens say all or most of their friends use porn regularly, which you should not be surprised that the next statistic is 5% of young adults and 11% of teens think viewing porn is a bad thing. Not very high, huh? It's common. It's out there. It is absolutely out there. The last one's a little startling. 64% of youth pastors and 57% of senior pastors have struggled with porn currently or in the past. It's a pretty high number. There are some more numbers. Look at those. See, when I get up here and I say, I've struggled with this, I'm the one being honest. And the numbers out here say the majority's on my side. Now, whether you're going to admit it or not is another thing. But those are real numbers. And I wondered how something so pervasive could be so invisible. I looked for research and resources within the Adventist church. No, didn't find anything. Kept looking, and I thought, how can it be such a powerful thing, equated by some researchers with the power of cocaine, that nothing's out there yet? So I decided to do something, and that is this, and you are here. And that's what this is about. Now, I want you to know that this New Freedom to Love workshop is not my thing. This is backed by the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists. And the reason I tell you that is because you're not alone. You have support. People recognize this as a thing, as a problem that needs to be addressed. Now, I have a t-shirt. I almost wore it for the presentation, but I didn't. You know, at a glance, it just looks like a biker shirt, right? But it says porn kills love. And I will tell you what I discovered is I put that shirt on and it starts conversations. Sometimes people will say, wow, that's cool, I like that. And you would not believe, and I mean that literally, you would not believe how many people have come up to me and said, you know what, I've really struggled with porn. Porn just about destroyed my marriage. I'm struggling with it now. Can you please help? And I found out that those numbers are not just dry numbers and statistics. They're real people. And I will tell you, they are people I know. And I can promise you, you have people in your life who struggle with it too. But we may just say, well, maybe that's just a Christian hang-up, right? It's just, that's just the puritanical side of things that have a problem with pornography, right? Wrong. There are 7 states. There were 6 when I started. Actually, there were 5 when I started writing the outline. Then there were 6. And then this last week, there are 7 states that have passed resolutions, not laws, but resolutions recognizing pornography as a public health threat. And there are a bunch more that are on the verge of doing the same thing. I thought, I thought that I'd heard that Time magazine did a cover on pornography. That'd be good. I could say that Time did not do a cover on pornography. They did 4. So the idea that secular society isn't paying attention to this is wrong. They are. New York Times had an amazing cover article about it. I don't know if you know who Russell Brand is, but he has an incredible rant about pornography. And he's pretty far removed from what you'd consider the Christian ideology. There's an amazing resource called Fight the New Drug. That's where I got that t-shirt, by the way, that takes on porn from the purely secular perspective. There's a lot of reasons to think, ooh, this is harmful, without coming from a Christian perspective. But this is coming from a Christian perspective. And as such, I want to, in this 30,000 foot, or maybe did I say 35,000 foot view here, we're going to set some ground rules for some assumptions that the rest of the things that we're going to be talking about will be based upon. Number one, we were created. We were created by a creator for relationship with him and with each other. It's interesting that the Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." But I'll tell you, friends, and we'll get into this, is that's where porn puts you, alone. It does not drive you into relationship. It drives you out of relationship. And that is straight from the mouth of God saying, it is not good for you to be alone. We're basing this on the idea that you didn't get here by survival of the most selfish. The one who clawed their way to the top or had the strongest biological urges. That's not how we got here. Another underlying assumption is this is not shame-based. Pretty much to a person, all of the other presenters who will follow me said, when we called and said, "Hey, we want to take this on, do you want to do it?" Almost all of them, the next thing they said was, only if it's not shame-based. It's a big deal. Because here's the difference. You're wondering, what is that about? Shame says, I am bad. And you can't change that. See, if I am a white guy. That's just who I am. I could identify as a polar bear, but I'm not. I'm a white guy. And I can't change that. That's who I am. Shame says, I am bad. Now, guilt says, I did something bad. And that's behavior. And behavior can be changed. Behavior is outside of me. We can do something about that. Shame says there's nothing you can do about who I am. And that is a promise to you that this is not shame-based because this has to do with behavior, not who you are. Oh, I'm going to go back to that. This baseline is not shame-based. This is not to shame those who are partaking in pornography, those who produce it, those who act in it, those who distribute it. This is not to shame or demonize any of those people. Not a bit. We're talking about porn as it is and what it does. This workshop is educational versus interventional. The difference is education teaches you things. It's one size fits most. Okay? Interventional is direct one-on-one, hey, I know what your problem is, here is a plan for your healing. That's a very specific thing, we're not getting into that. I want to make that distinction. This is not the same thing as counseling. I want to give you a metaphor. Imagine if you're driving in the mountains, we have mountains here in Colorado, and you come around a curve and you see that a bridge is out. And some cars have gone down off the bridge, and you decide, well, I can't get the cars back up, so I will stop and I will slow traffic down. I'll say, whoa, go back. Do not go this way. You'll get hurt. That's this workshop. Therapists and counselors are the ones who are the first responders who are actually caring for the individual needs of people who are broken. And I will tell you, there are people out there, you might not know this, who specialize in sexual therapy, in talking to people and healing the brokenness from that. And let me tell you, just another little thing that might surprise you, those people are booked. They're busy people. There's a lot of this. There's not a lot of recognition that this is a problem, but I'll tell you what, those professionals, they have clients, lots of them. Another thing is that we're not going to use scary statistics, the biggest, baddest, most outlandish things we can find. This is pretty middle of the road stuff you're going to see here. And we want to make sure that you know that these statistics are real. We're not inflating it just to make it a big deal. So we're not picking the outliers here. So that's one of the assumptions going forward in this as well. Oh, by the way, one of the sources of the statistics, just to give you a hint, are the porn sites themselves. You may think, well, porn sites are anonymous, aren't they? If you think they don't know who you are totally kidding yourself. They know where you live, they know what kind of computer you're on, they know how you vote, they know how you spend, they know who your favorite sports team is. I am not kidding. You can look it up. They've got it city by city. Yeah, how about that for a little bit of like, whoa. Yeah, that's not hyperbole. That's real. The definition of porn for the purposes of New Freedom to Love, what is that exactly? What are you going to call pornography? I'm going to call that images, moving or still, or words, whose intent is to sexually excite or arouse. That's the intent of it. Now, I want to make it a point to say some people and some cultures have different thresholds of what that is. Some people can look at one thing and say, whoa, that's crazy. And somebody else looks at it and says, whoa, what's the big deal? It's not doing anything for me. But porn I'm going to define as the intent of sexually exciting or arousing. Okay, so you know what we're talking about here. And with the caveat that that can vary person by person and culture by culture. Another really important point here is that there is a wide range of impact. Some people can see one thing and doesn't do the same thing to them that it does to somebody else. Some people can experience one symptom, not somebody else. Think about smokers. You may have known somebody who's a smoker and say, they've smoked for 10, 20, 30 years. There's nothing wrong with them. It doesn't recommend smoking, though. Okay? But please keep in mind, and this is very important, that as we roll through some of these things that I'm going to go through, that there is a range of impact, and not everybody experiences every symptom or every bad dimension of this, okay? Not every user or not everyone who's exposed to pornography is an addict. I want to make that really clear too. People think, oh, maybe this workshop is for addicts. No, it isn't. Actually, it's mostly for people who are not addicts. It could be helpful if you're struggling with an addiction, but this isn't really the cure for that. Might be, I hope so. Stick with me. But this is for everybody else. And that's why we use addiction talk. Things like recovery and triggers and things of that nature. We use addiction language when we're talking about this. Another thing is victory is possible. We're going into this with the understanding, the assumption, the belief that victory is possible. This isn't a thing where, well, I'm in it and that's who I am and that's just the way it's going to be forever. Because I'll tell you, I know that some people out there in this audience or who are watching this feel this is where I'm going to be forever, and it isn't. You do not have to be there forever. Here's a big one. Does porn cause bad behavior? Ooh, this is a big one. Is that what causes it? And people are braced. You're like, well, yes, and I'm going to say no. No. Porn does not cause bad behavior. Stick with me here. I live in Colorado, and in Colorado we have wildfires. You've heard of those, right? Well, it takes two basic things to have a wildfire. It takes a spark, and it takes fuel. If you're missing either of those two things, you can't have a wildfire. It is my understanding from having read the Bible that the spark of sin got into our hearts years and years and years and years ago. The desire to do bad things to ourselves or other people has been in us for a very, very long time, preceding pornography, by the way. But when you pour high-octane fuel on a spark, what do you get? You get a wildfire. And that's where I see pornography adding to our already broken natures and causing the devastation that it does. So the idea that it's causation versus correlation, no, I'm going to change the conversation and say it's fuel on a spark, and that causes the wildfire. Our goal here with New Freedom to Love is to get the best relationships we can possibly have. We're not going to settle for second or third best. We want the best relationships that we can have with others and with our Creator. That's where we're going with this. Here's one you should cheer for. Sex was God's invention. He came up with that. He gave it to us as a gift. Satan took it, perverted it, counterfeited it, and then sold it as his own. And that leaves us with a very mixed up understanding of what's good, what's bad, what should we do, what's okay. And we say crazy stuff like, sex is kind of dirty, save it for someone you love. What kind of messed up thing does that put in our heads? And I'm telling you, there are counselors working to unravel that mess from years of people with this bizarre perspective. Now we're going to take it back. God gave it to us. We're going to take it back for what it was supposed to be. That's what we're doing. So, really, what's all the fuss about pornography? I mean, it's victimless, it's harmless, it's anonymous. What's the problem? Well, the problem is all of those things are untrue. I'm going to walk you through some of these things. Sin is sad. I know, you're like, well, yeah, duh. Think about this acronym. It is seductive, it's addictive, and then it's destructive. See, who would walk into something and says, hey, try this. It's going to destroy your career, your life, your personal. You'll probably end up hating yourself, throw you into depression. Give it a try. No. We would all say, well, of course not. That's ridiculous. I don't want any of that. So sin doesn't appear that way. Sin appears seductive. Hey, this is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with this. And we try it and we think, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And then all of a sudden we realize, oh, wait a minute, I can't get out of this. It's addictive. And then once we're in that addiction, we discover, oh, not only is it addictive, it's destructive. Now what do I do? That's why porn is bad. Why is porn bad? It messes with your brain chemistry. And I was talking with one of my associates here as we were putting this together. She said, do you really want to say it messes with your brain chemistry? Yeah, it messes with your brain chemistry. We're going to hear a lot more about that when Troy talks. I got into this when I first started, and I thought, well, it's just a thing that has to do with my eyeballs, and it's just that, right? No. What goes in my eyeballs triggers things in my brain that I didn't know anything about, and it's messing with my brain chemistry in a way that I had no idea about. And just shortcut there, it's unhealthy. Okay, just to let you know, that's the short story. It can drop bonding chemicals in your brain that gives new meaning glued to the screen, and not in a good way. There are some therapists and people who study this who equate the chemistry that's being dropped in your brain to that of a cocaine addiction. Wow, that puts new light on it, doesn't it? So instead of just saying to somebody who's like struggling with it, well, why don't you just stop? Really, would you say that to somebody who's got a coke addiction? Well, why don't you just change your mind, quit? Oh, it's a little harder than that. It really is. Why else is it bad? It's empty. It's unfulfilling. It doesn't get you anywhere. See, as a photographer and videographer, I got to go into an amazing flight simulator. I mean, this thing is really cool. It's in a 3-story building. It's its own building. You have to have FAA clearance to even go into this thing. We got into it. We were doing some video. You sit in it. It's one of these things where it's got a little walkway. You walk across this little walkway, and you go in, and then the walkway goes up. And now you're in the little capsule. And the door closes behind you, and the windows turn on, and there are screens, but they're all lined up perfectly, and it looks like you're flying somewhere. And when the pilot, the guy who was showing the simulation, when the pilot would do a dive, the whole thing would go down. The whole thing would tip. The horizon would tip. My brain's going, whoa, hey, I think I'm flying here. And we're in this thing, and we're flying around to a new destination. We opened the door, and guess what? We hadn't gone anywhere. It was a simulation. There's a part of your brain that thinks you're going somewhere, and then you realize, hey, we didn't actually go anywhere. It's a dead end. It's unfulfilling. I don't know if you've ever heard of cormorant fishing. It's an Asian thing where they take birds that naturally dive into the water and chase fish around. They swim after the fish and they swallow them. That's how they eat, right? Well, what the fishermen have done is they've taken a band of metal and put it around the bird's neck so that the bird can't swallow any kind of decent-sized fish. So they can send their birds out. The birds dive for the fish because they're hungry, right? They get a fish in their mouth and they can't swallow it. They come back to the boat. The fisherman plops the fish out, sends them out again. This cormorant's still hungry. So what's he going to do? He's going to get more fish. He gets another fish in his mouth. Is he full? No. He can't swallow it. Porn is that way. It is unfulfilling. It will not get you where you want to go. Porn offers diminishing returns. Diminishing returns is a financial term. What that means is if you put in a certain amount of money, you're expecting to get out some sort of result. Let's suppose I'm investing in a factory, and I put a $50,000 investment into the factory, and I get $75,000 worth of product out. Well, the next year I put $50,000 in, and I get $60,000 worth of product out. I think, ooh, that's not good. And then the following year I put in $50,000, and I get $40,000 in product out. Is this heading in a good direction? No. That's what porn offers, is diminishing returns. And when you spend more than you get, it's called being upside down. I don't know if you knew this, but it costs 1.82 cents to make a penny. You can't make up for that in volume. The faster you make them, the more you lose. That's diminishing returns. I'll tell you a little funny story of my own having to do with diminishing returns. When I was in grade school, I had a dirt bike, like the bicycle kind of dirt bike, right? And I like to jump stuff. It started off with the curb, you could go from the sidewalk side into the street. And that gives you about, 6 inches of air, depending on your curb. That's kind of fun, but then after a while, that's not that exciting, right? So I built a bigger ramp. You could take some cinder blocks and stack those up and put a board on it, and then you could get some real air off that, You could get some distance. Well, after a while, that wasn't very fun. And at my school, I used to ride my bike to school. At my school, they had a huge mulch pile. The thing must have been this big. So I reconfigured that thing into a jump. It was about waist high. It was a pretty good sized jump. So I took off on that thing, and wow, that was fun. That was fun for a couple days. Then it wasn't as fun. So I decided to get some trash cans. See how many trash cans? I raised in the days of Evel Knievel, right? So I knew who this guy was. I'm like, I'm going to jump some trash cans. And that was fun for a while. And I'll tell you what was really fun is where I involved some other people. I got some first graders and put them in the trash cans. That was awesome. Now, the first grade teacher, when she came out and saw this, did not think that was awesome. She's like, well, how did you get here? I'm like, I don't know. It was diminishing returns. I needed more thrill and more danger to feel like I was accomplishing something. That's where porn takes you, and it never stops. It commoditizes sex. That's what pornography does. You're like, well, okay, what does that mean, and why is that a bad thing? The lie is that this empowers women. This gives them empowerment. It lets them, it says that sex is a commodity. It says that's what they get to give. That's theirs to give, right? It says it's transactional. It's a thing. Like I'm a photographer, and when somebody asks me to do some work for them, they don't freak out when I say, well, I want some money. Oh, okay, so we have a deal. I do this for you, you give me money back, that's work. That's a transaction, right? But when sex becomes transactional and the body is a commodity and somebody shows up and says, hey, I'd like this job, and the employer says, you give me sex, I'll give you this job, we all go, oh, that's horrible, how could you do that? Well, wait a minute, back over here we just said it was a commodity. When Hugh Hefner sold it, it was good. It was like, hey, we're empowering women. And then when somebody else in Hollywood says, hey, you give me sex, I give you a role in a movie, we say, oh, that's horrible. It's the same economy. That's what porn does. It teaches us that sex is a commodity. It has nothing to do with a relationship. And I'm telling you, that's a bad place to go. And our society is finally kind of looking around going, hey, maybe we didn't mean to get here. How did we get here? I'm proposing that's one of the dimensions of how we got here. Porn is fake. Now you may think, well, duh. I mean, well, let me tell you something. It's more fake than you think. There's a funny little story. A friend of mine lives in Breckenridge, and he said there's a little line in their newspaper, overheard in the lift line. And apparently there was a young guy who was standing there with his snowboard instructor, and he said to his snowboard instructor, wow, this is a lot harder than the video game. Right? Like real life is not the same as the video game. It's like, wow, Who would have guessed? It appears to be an intimate act. Really, ultimately, that's what pornography is, right? It's a window into somebody else's intimate behavior. And we think, well, maybe it's fake. It's so fake. If you stepped back and you took a look at this, they have cast the people for who they look like and what they are and what they're doing. You've got a director, you've got camera operators, you've got light people, you've got somebody over here fixing a meal. This is not what sex is supposed to be. Talk about being on center stage, that's exactly what's going on. It's fake. The entire thing is contrived. Now that's a problem because some people look at that and say, well, I can learn from that. I can learn from porn. That's a bad plan. That's kind of like saying, hey, I want to be a good marksman. I want to be a cop, and I'm going to learn my skills from James Bond. Well, who better, right? Except did you know that the new James Bond is actually afraid of guns? He doesn't like handguns. He thinks they're horrible, awful. Except he looks like he's this awesome marksman. He never misses because he never shoots. The other reason that this is a really big problem, is fake and unrealistic, is because, as I mentioned before, it messes with your brain chemistry. See, if we watch Superman and we see somebody and he stands and looks at the sky and he just takes off, there's really not much of our brain that thinks that's real. We're like, yeah, that's fake. We know that. It's Hollywood. The problem with pornography is that drops, whether we know it or not. You can't stop it. It drops chemicals, and there's another part of your brain that all of a sudden does not think it's fake. So part of your brain is going, hey, fake, that's not real. And other parts going, yeah, that's real. That's going on here. And it's harder to separate those things than you think. In fact, impossible. And that's why it being fake is a real problem. Porn is personally destructive. Well, how so? It's get. You might give your credit card number, but other than that, it's get. It's all for me. It's what I want, when I want, how I want. And I ask you, is that good training for life? Would you want somebody as a friend who always only got what they want, when they want, how they want? Those are the most miserable people on the planet to be around. But that's what porn teaches. If you think, well, not really. Have you ever heard of clicking on a site and the porn star pops up and says, I got a big meeting tomorrow. Not really in the mood. No, they're always there at your beck and call, right? Every time. Or maybe it's like, I think I'm getting a cold. Real or not? Nope, game over. That's real life, okay? Porn never does that. It says yes. And in real life, that's bad training because it's not real. Another reason it's personally destructive is that it can be used to self-medicate or cover up unresolved trauma in the user's life. Well, why is that a problem? Because it's a placebo. You take a pill to kill the germs, except it's not a pill that can kill the germs. It just makes you feel good. Meanwhile, you're getting destroyed from inside. That's why it's a problem. It's personally destructive because it tells men, you're just nothing but a slobbering dog. You can't help it. We throw the ball, you're going to run and go get it. You ever thought of yourself like that? Is less than Pavlov's dog? How do you like being told that's who you are? Nope, we're better than that. Now, when people get into this cycle, it typically runs like this: guilt, isolation, then self-medication. And to people who struggle with pornography, that self-medication is pornography, which leads to guilt, isolation, self-medication. And it goes down, 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 down. It doesn't get better. It's correlated with depression and even suicide. Does that sound like that's healthy? No, not at all. Now here's the crowning irony of this whole thing. Pornography is sexually destructive. What? How? Okay, come on. I mean, pornography is like it's an upper, right? Sin is sad. It starts out seductive, then it's addictive, and then it is destructive. It messes with your brain chemistry to the point it can, in some people, this is well documented, this isn't an outlying theory, it can mess with their brain so much that they can't sexually function in real life. You may be going, what? Yeah, impotence. They can only get it on with the screen, not with a real person. They're like, well, they didn't tell me that in the trailer. Well, of course not. You wouldn't go there. But that is one of the places porn goes. And it is personally destructive. It is relationally destructive. I mean, how many of you, I'm going to speak to the guys because I'm a guy, how many of you guys would go up to your significant other, wife, girlfriend, and just say, you're really not doing it for me anymore. You're not good enough. Would you say that? I would hope absolutely not. But your use of pornography can say that to your spouse or significant other. How destructive is that? Again, porn doesn't advertise that's what it's doing, but folks, it is. Dr. Holbrook's going to talk more about these things and rebuilding that damage that happens. It's a real thing. It can give self-esteem issues for a spouse. Looks, behavior, it's not enough is what it says. You're not enough, really. I need to go over here for this. Now, a lot of guys, you don't think you're saying that. That's not what your intent is, but that's what's being heard a lot of the time. And you wouldn't say that on purpose, but that's what your actions are saying. It changes the expectations of society and individuals. Well, relationally, how's that? If you go home and enter into a search engine, sex before kissing, you will find that there is a phenomena happening today, right now, in this world, in this town, in your town, where boys and girls who don't even know each other or like each other are approaching each other and saying, hey, let's have sex, huh? They're not even interested in holding hands. Not interested in even kissing each other. They're going straight to sex because porn normalizes that behavior. It says, hey, that's normal. And they begin to believe that and act like that. You can project your expectations onto your spouse or your other, expecting them to be like the people you've seen on screen. Hey, why aren't you a little bit more like that? That's not healthy. And by the way, you're not all that either. Just saying. When we have a situation where we've got 2 in bed and 3 in the head, it messes with relationships. How could it not? Well, it does. Somebody coined the term, I don't remember who, that pornography can lead to relational autism. That means difficulty speaking to and communicating with real people. You think, wow, can it get that broken? Yes, I can assure you it can. It's not healthy, not good for relationships. I mean, real relationships take patience, they take discovery, they take give and take, love and respect. Porn doesn't ask any of those things. And it's relationally destructive. It's societally destructive. Well, how does that mess with the fabric of society? It objectifies humans. It teaches us to look at human beings that God created as things. Now, one of the things that I do, in addition to my visual work, is I have flipped some houses in real estate. Look at a house, think, oh, I wonder what that thing's worth. Maybe I could paint that. We could probably put some new siding, put a new kitchen in that. Wonder how much we could rent that for. And so when I drive around and I'll go to new places, that's just an intriguing thing for me. I'll look around at the real estate, I'll pop open my phone, look at prices, look at what rent is going for, and I just think, this is interesting. Wonder what we could do with this. See, I look at that real estate as an object to get me what I want. How broken is that? To look at other human beings and say, I wonder what they could do for me. That's not cool. If you wonder if that's a true thing, if you wonder if that's even possible, Think about a porn star popping up. Let's just dressed, keep it in your mind, okay? Right? Early in the scenario, they pop up and they're doing their thing, and they're doing their sexy thing. Is one of the things that pops through your mind saying, I wonder if they're really good at math. I bet she's a whiz at calculus. Maybe that person's a poet, a really talented writer. No, because our expectation is set on one thing. We have taken that person and turned them into a commodity as to what they can do for us. That is not good for society. Sex on screen is a very one-dimensional thing. It's even less than one dimension. Stick with me. You've heard of, we're mental, spiritual, relational kind of people, all that stuff, like we're multidimensional, right? Well, porn's not spiritual. I think most people would go, yeah, okay, we're not going to label it as that. It's not relational. Those people don't know you and they don't care about you. I mean, they're showing you all the stuff that you would think they care about you, but they don't. And it's not even physical. We think, well, yeah, sex is physical, right? It's a thing on screen. It's not even physical. When you're watching a thing on a screen and you're on a different time zone, that's no physical act between you and another person. It's not even physical. And what we've done is we've taken that other human being and we've said, they're not even a real physical sexual person. They're just one-dimensional. It's just sex on the screen for me. That's it. That's a pretty low bar, don't you think? To put another person to say that's what they're worth, that's what they're for. There is a correlation, not necessarily a causation, but a correlation between supply and demand for human beings. Human trafficking. When there is a demand, there will be a supply. Human trafficking, in case you did not know this, is a real thing. It's a real problem. And as consumers of pornography, we are in our own way dropping a quarter into that machine. If you don't want to see that machine go, quit dropping quarters into it. If there's no demand, there will be no supply. Entertainment titles. In the research of this thing, I follow a number of blogs, and one of them pointed out to me a very interesting thing, that if you look at some of the entertainment titles to get you into this, like, hey, wouldn't this be cool? Oh, look at this scenario, look at this. The entertainment titles, when they put it on pornography, we say, it's entertainment. But then when someone in real life does it, it's a crime. We think, it's entertainment. How can you say that what we see and what we hear about that as entertainment can have any impact on what we think? Now remember, already I told you that when we're looking at sex on a screen, it does something chemically in our brain that we don't help, we can't change it, we don't know about that, and it's telling our brain somewhere else, this isn't as fake as the rest of our brain maybe thinks it is. Okay? So that's going on in the back. And I want to drop this on you. In 2017, advertisers in this country dropped $534 billion, that's with a B, dollars on advertising. What they're betting $500 billion on is that them showing you something is going to change your behavior. Do you think they're all complete idiots? They increase that number every year, expecting that what they show you will change your behavior. And then we look at this and we'll say, you know what people say? It's not going to change their behavior. It's just entertainment. Really? Porn is spiritually destructive. We may think, he's breaking that commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. I wasn't even going to go there. How about the one about stealing? Stealing something that isn't yours. Intimacy that does not belong to you that you're stealing. You ever think about that? Or how about coveting? Wow, I wish I had that. I wish that was mine. That's at the root of pornography. It's right there. And if God knows what he's talking about when he says, don't do these things, they will be bad for you, do you think that maybe it could be bad for you? You ever stop to realize that all those actors, actresses, all those people that we're looking at, when we tune it on, we're like, look at that. That's a daughter of God. That's a son of God. That's somebody that the Savior died for. It's a little harder to look at them that way and say, turn me on, when we know that's who they are. But that's who they are. And if we can turn that part off in our hearts and in our minds, we've done something extremely destructive in our own lives. It's not healthy. It drives a wedge in our relationship with God. It always does. You know, it's an interesting thing. There's this story of the prodigal son, which I recently read. There's an interesting line in there when he talks about his sin. He's done his wrong thing. He's gone out and squandered his father's money, and he decides he's going to come back. And listen to the language that he uses when he talks about his reconciliation. He says, my plan is to say to my father, I have sinned against God and before you. Interesting thing, Joseph says exactly the same thing to Potiphar's wife. She says, hey, come to bed with me, come to bed with me. And he says, how could I do this wicked thing and sin against God and before man? When we go ahead with this and we say, full steam ahead, no harm in this, we're breaking our relationship with God, and that always ends up in pain. Okay, so you're convinced. You're like, okay, all that stuff, porn's bad. I'm with you. What can I do about it? What can I do about it? Maybe I'm involved in it, dabbling with it. Maybe I don't have any exposure with it at all. I don't even know what to do. Well, we can change the culture of the church, because that has power. It has way more power than you would think it does. Changing the culture. First, we acknowledge the reality of the problem. We understand that sin has power in secrecy. And I want to tell you a little story here. When I was in college, I was invited to a little non-denominational church. It was more like a small group, really, than a church. But I went there as an outsider, and I was sitting in the back corner, and they were doing the thing that they do in their church, and then they had some kind of sharing time or something like this. I don't know what it was. And a young woman stood up, and she said something about what she had done. She confessed something personal. And I remember thinking, does she not know where she is? We're in church. And my mind immediately went to, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? And then the most amazing thing happened. It still makes me emotional to this day. Half the church stood up, went over to her, put their hands on her and started praying for her and saying, we're here for you. When I saw that, I'm like, that's church. That's where I want to be. I don't know where these people are, who these people are, what they believe, but that's the kind of place I want to be at, is when I could stand up and say, I have a problem, that people would immediately surround me and not ostracize me. You can do that. That's within your power. God uses people in his rescues. We want it to be like, well, we prayed about it, and it's all good, and it's all gone. Those who are struggling with porn, you know what I'm talking about, because you've all done it. But God uses people in his rescues. I'll tell you a little joke here. There's a person, and they're in their house, they're in the river valley, and they get word that there's a flood coming. And he says, oh God, please rescue me. And the sky opens up, and light beams come down, and God says, I will rescue you. And the person's like, awesome, I'm like going to be rescued. So they're waiting around their house, the water level's getting kind of high, it's getting up to their knees, and a big truck pulls up. One of these big lifted trucks, and they pull a National Guard thing, and they say, hey, jump in the truck, we'll get you. And the guy's like, nope, God's got me. The truck's like, well, okay, can't make you get in. The truck drives off. Well, pretty soon, the flood gets higher and higher, and they got to climb to the second floor of their house, right? And the floodwaters are getting higher and higher, and a boat comes up, and they say, hey, jump in the boat, we'll take you to safety. He says, nope, got it from God, God's going to save me. Well, the boat takes off. Water gets even higher and higher. Pretty soon the person's sitting on their chimney, and a helicopter comes by, and they lower a rope, and they say, hook this on. The guy's like, no, God's got me. I'm all okay. Helicopter flies off. Well, about the time the person's standing on their tiptoes on their chimney, water's about up to here, and they say, God, I thought you were going to rescue me. The sky opens up again, and God says, I sent you a truck and a boat and a helicopter. What did you expect? When we look for healing, we ask for God to just do this miraculous thing without other people, but God uses people in his rescues. You can be one of those people. There's an amazing video on YouTube. If you just type in addiction, it's the first one. It's got 16 million views. It tells an interesting story that in Vietnam, about 20% of the soldiers in Vietnam were heroin users. 20%, that's a lot of people. A lot of people back home were just horrified. They thought, oh my goodness, we're going to get tens of thousands of zombies, of addicts coming back into the country. What are we going to do? Well, it turns out that when they left the awful circumstances of Vietnam and came back into their homes and communities, of those 20% who were using heroin, 95% just quit, just walked away from it. Was done. Well, what in the world happened? We changed the environment that they were in. The environment that they were in was one that they wanted to be in, and they could walk away from their addictions. There are therapists who have told me that they postulate that as many as half of addicts, not people who are just used or exposed to it, but that suffer from addictions, can actually walk away from their addictions with the appropriate community. We're talking about accountability people and support groups and so on like this, that if they know they're accepted, they can walk away from this. You can be part of that solution. You know, my t-shirts open up a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and I will tell you that me just being a safe person has opened so many doors. You can be that kind of person too. Now, I want to make one thing clear, that saying, look, I support you is not the same thing as saying, hey, whatever you're doing, that's okay. I may say, what you're doing is not okay, but I'm here to help you get through that and pass you, and I will not ostracize you. You know, solitary confinement is the last thing a person like that needs. You think, well, I mean, really? Is that a thing? Well, okay, put it this way. If somebody says, I think my appendix is about to burst, I've got this problem, would we say, you should probably go home and pray about that? No. We'd send them home to die, right? We wouldn't do that. We'd say, I'll drive you to the hospital. Hey, if you can't afford it, we'll put together some kind of fundraising thing, and we'll get money for you. We'll be here for you, right? But when it comes to mental addictions, we think, oh, I don't know what we can do about that. That might be like Ebola. I might get near you, and I might catch it, and then I would die. That's not the case. The path out of unhealthy bonds is to form healthy bonds. We're scared of sexual sin in the church. Let's admit that. We really are. We've set up a separate category for sin, and we've said, hey, this is worse than the others, except that in John 8, Jesus is dealing with a woman caught in adultery. One of the first things he says to her in the direct conversation he has with her is, I don't condemn you. It's the first thing he says to her. He does say, go and leave your life of sin, after he said, I don't condemn you. In Luke 7, Jesus is at Simon the Pharisee's house, and they're having dinner, and a woman's starting to minister to Jesus, washing his feet, and Simon the Pharisee says, man, if this guy was a prophet, he would really know what kind of woman this is. And he wasn't implying she cheats on her taxes or she goes over the speed limit. Okay? It's sexual sin. And Simon's thinking, oh, this guy's he doesn't understand who she is. And Jesus says, let me tell you a story about forgiveness. The one who's forgiven the most loves the most. Simon didn't get it because he hadn't been forgiven. He hadn't experienced grace himself. And if you haven't experienced grace, you can't offer it. This is from Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Life Together, from page 118. Anybody who lives beneath the cross and who has discerned in the cross of Jesus the utter wickedness of all men and of his own heart will find there is no sin that can ever be alien to him. Anybody who has once been horrified by the dreadfulness of his own sin that nailed Jesus to the cross will no longer be horrified by even the rankest sin of a brother. Looking at the cross of Jesus, he knows the human heart. You know what that means? I'll put it in really simple terms. Jesus said it. He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. That's what it means. It means if you don't understand that you have problems, that you have sin, which you do have, you can't be gracious. But if you understand you have sinned and you have been forgiven, you can offer that grace to other people. That's what you can do to change the community for better. Community facilitates change. Confession and repentance is the individual's job. It doesn't have to be in front of the church, just to let you know. That's not a prerequisite, right? That's the individual's job, is confession and repentance. Forgiveness and acceptance, that's the church's job. How? How can you give some practical help? How about accountability? Say, I will meet with you, I will talk with you, I will support you. Or facilitating a recovery group, you can do that. Or financial help. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there are counselors who help people through this. It does cost money. We would pay for somebody if they were, had some kind of infection. It was like, well, if we don't give them this expensive medicine, it's going to kill them. We'll say, well, let's buy the medicine, right? Well, mental health is valuable too. But most of all, it's being willing to have the conversation. Now, parents who might be interested in this think, well, what's the number one predictor that my kids will handle porn well? It's good news and bad news. The bad news is there's no shortcut to it. The good news is the number one predictor for children to be able to handle pornography well is a strong relationship with their parents. It's not an internet filter. It's not a series of books that you read. It's a relationship. I'm going to tell you a parable of an Indian boy. He was tasked with crossing the mountains, and he had to go over a snowy pass. And as he was on his way to the snowy pass to accomplish this task that he had, he came across a snake. And this rattlesnake spoke to him. And the rattlesnake said, "Hey, would you take me across the mountains?" And the boy said, "Well, I can't pick you up. You're a rattlesnake. You'll bite me." And the rattlesnake says, No, I'm different. I won't bite you. See, I'm cold-blooded. And the thing is that if I bite you and we get up on the mountain pass, then I'll fall into the snow and I will die and you will die. So I won't bite you. The boy thinks about it. It's like, well, the snake says, just tuck me inside your shirt where I'll be warm. We'll both be okay. Okay, when we get to the other side, you just put me down. The boy says, okay. So he picks up the snake, tucks him in his shirt, begins the journey. Everything's fine. He gets all the way up to the pass where it's cold and snowy, and he's trudging through, and the snake bites him right next to the heart. And the boy pulls the snake out, and he throws him down, and he says, "Why did you do that? We're both going to die." And the snake says, "That's what we do. You knew what I was when you picked me up." Friends, if you haven't picked up porn yet, don't. If you have, put it down. Thank you.